Chapter 13 The Law of the Picture. People do what people see. Several years ago, filmmaker Steven Spielberg and actor Tom Hanks produced a series of television shows on HBO called Band of Brothers, based on the book of the same name by historian Stephen Ambrose. The 10 episodes chronicled the story of Easy Company, a group of paratroopers from the 101st Airborne who fought during World War II. The men of Easy Company were as tough as soldiers get, and they fought heroically from the invasion of Normandy to the end of the war. The story of Easy Company is a great study in leadership for the various sergeants, lieutenants, and captains who commanded the men. Displayed many styles of leadership, both good and bad. When the leadership was good, it made the difference, not only in the way the soldiers performed, but in the outcome of their battles and ultimately of the war. The wrong picture. From the very first episode of the television series, the contrasting leadership styles were on display. Herbert Sobel, Easy Company's commanding officer during its training, was shown to be a brutal and autocratic leader with a sadistic streak. He drove the men harder than the commander of any other company. He arbitrarily revoked passes and inflicted punishment. But judging from Ambrose's research, Sobel was even worse than he was depicted in the series. Sobel drove the men mercilessly, which was fine since he was preparing them for combat, but he didn't push himself the same way, being barely capable of passing the physical test required of paratroopers, nor did he display the high level of competence he demanded from everyone else. Ambrose writes about an incident during training that was representative of Sobel's leadership. One night, exercise, Sobel decided to teach his men a lesson. He and Sergeant Evans went sneaking through the company position to steal rifles from sleeping men. The mission was successful. By daylight, Sobel and Evans had nearly 50 rifles. With great fanfare, Evans called the company together and Sobel began to tell the men what miserable soldiers they were. What Sobel didn't realize was that the men he was berating weren't his own. He had wandered into the wrong camp and stolen the rifles belonging to Fox Company. Sobel didn't even realize his mistake until the commander of Fox Company came up with 45 of his men. The men who served under Sobel mocked him and undermined him. By the time Easy Company began preparations for the invasion of Normandy, many men were taking bets on which of them would shoot Sobel when they finally got into combat. Fortunately, Sobel was removed from his position as company commander and resigned before they went into combat. Another bad picture. Another officer's highly incompetent leadership was depicted in an episode called The Breaking Point. It recounted the Battle of the Bulge when the soldiers were preparing to take the town of Foy from the Germans. By then, the men of Easy Company were experienced veterans, and they were facing one of the most difficult times of the war. They suffered from bitter cold and from merciless shelling by German artillery. During that time, an Easy Company platoon was commanded by Lieutenant Dyke, a leader with political connections but no previous combat experience. Dyke's method of leadership was to avoid his men, refuse to make a decision, and disappear for long periods of time to take a walk, including when he was needed most. Not one of the men respected him, and when Dyke was finally required to lead his men into an assault on the town, he failed miserably and was relieved of command. A different kind of picture. Fortunately, most of Easy Company's leaders were excellent, and one in particular was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and was considered by the men to be the best combat leader in World War II. That person was Dick Winters. He started out as a platoon leader in Easy Company during their training and was promoted to company commander after Normandy, and then to battalion executive officer. He finished his military career with the rank of major. Time after time, Winters helped his men to perform at the highest level, and he always led from in front, setting the examples and taking the risks along with his men. Ambrose describes Winters' philosophy of leadership simply as officers go first. Whenever his troops needed to assault an enemy position, Winters was in front leading the charge. One of the most remarkable incidents demonstrating Winters' way of leading by example occurred soon after D-Day on the road to Carentan. a town that Easy Company needed to take from the Germans. As the American paratroopers under his command approached the town, they became pinned down by German machine gunfire, huddled in ditches on either side of the road. They wouldn't move forward when ordered to, yet if they didn't move, they would eventually be cut to pieces. Winters tried rallying them. He coaxed them. He kicked them. He ran from one ditch to the other as machine gun bullets flew by. Finally, he jumped into the middle of the road, bullets glancing off the ground near him, and shouted at the men to get moving. Everyone got up and moved forward as one, and they helped to take the town. More than 35 years later, Floyd Talbert, a sergeant at the time, wrote to Winters to comment about about the incident. "I'll never forget seeing you in the middle of the road. You were my total inspiration. All my boys felt the same way." In 2006, Winters summed up his approach to leadership saying, "I may not have been the best combat commander, but I always strove to be. My men depended on me to carefully analyze every tactical situation, to maximize the resources that I had at my disposal, to think under pressure, and then to lead them by personal example." When Ambrose was asked what allowed Easy Company to distinguish itself during the war, to rise above its peers, Ambrose was clear in his response. They weren't all that much better than other paratroopers, or other Rangers, or the Marines. They were one of many elite units in the war, but what made them special, even among those who were already self-selected and special, was their leadership. The great CO's platoon, leaders and sergeants. Not all elite units had such luck in their leaders, and that's the difference. Why did that make such a difference? Because people do what people see. That is the law of the picture. When the leaders show the way with the right actions, their followers copy them and succeed. Little box. Great leaders always seem to embody two seemingly disparate qualities. They are both highly visionary and highly practical, making the picture come alive. Great leaders always seem to embody two seemingly disparate qualities. They are both highly visionary and highly practical. Their vision enables them to see beyond the immediate. They can envision what's coming and what must be done. Leaders possess an understanding of how mission provides purpose, answering the question why. Vision provides a picture, answering the question what. Strategy provides a plan, answering the question how. As author Hans Finzel observed, leaders are paid to be dreamers. The higher you go in leadership, the more you work about the future. At the same time, leaders are practical enough to know that vision without action achieves nothing. They make themselves responsible for helping their followers to take action. That can be difficult because followers often cannot envision the future as a leader does. They can't picture what's best for the team. They lose track of the big picture. Why? Because vision has a tendency to leak. Leaders are stewards of the vision. So what should they do to bridge the vision gap between them and their followers? The temptation for many leaders is to merely communicate about the vision. Don't get me wrong, communication is certainly important. Good leaders must communicate the vision clearly, creatively, and continually. The leader's effective communication of the vision makes the picture clear, but that is not enough. The leaders must also live the vision. The leader's effective modeling of the vision makes the picture come alive. Little box. The leader's effective modeling of the vision makes the picture come alive. Good leaders are always conscious of the fact that they are setting the example, and others are going to do what they do, for better or worse. In general, the better the leader's actions, the better their people's. That's not to say that leaders have all the answers. Anyone who has led anyone knows that. The leaders who make the greatest impact are often those who lead well in the midst of uncertainty. Andy Stanley, an excellent leader and communicator, has addressed the issue. A few years ago, at the Catalyst Conference for Leaders, he said, "Uncertainty is not an indication of poor leadership. Rather, it indicates a need for leadership. The nature of leadership demands that there always be an element of uncertainty. The temptation is to think, if I were a good leader, I would know exactly what to do. Increased responsibility means dealing with more and more intangibles, and therefore more complex uncertainty. Leaders can afford to be uncertain, but we cannot afford to be unclear. People will not follow fuzzy leadership. When times are tough, uncertainty is high, and chaos threatens to overwhelm everyone. Followers need a clear picture from their leaders the most. That's when they need a leader who embraces the law of the picture. The living picture they see in their leader produces energy, passion, and motivation to keep going. Modeling insights for leaders. If you desire to be the best leader you can become, you must not neglect the law of the picture. As you strive to improve as an example to your followers, remember these things. Number one, followers are always watching what you do. If you're a parent, you have probably already realized that your children are always watching what you do. Say anything you want, but your children learn more from what they see than from anywhere else. As parents, Margaret and I realized this early. No matter what we taught our children, they insisted on behaving like us. How frustrating. Legendary UCLA basketball coach John Wooden quotes a poem that explains it perfectly. No written word nor spoken plea can teach your youth what they should be, nor all the books on all the shelves. It's what the teachers are themselves. Just as children watch their parents and emulate their behavior, so do employees watching their bosses. If the bosses come in late, then employees feel that they can too. If the bosses cut corners, employees cut corners. People do what people see. Followers may doubt what their leaders say, but they usually believe what they do, and they imitate it. Former U.S. Army General and Secretary of State Colin Powell observed, "You can issue all the memos and give all the motivational speeches you want, but if the rest of the people in your organization don't see you putting forth your very best effort every single day, they won't either." Whitley David asserted, "A good supervisor is a catalyst, not a drill sergeant. He creates an atmosphere where intelligent people are willing to follow him. He doesn't command, he convinces. Nothing is more convincing than living out what you say you believe." Number two, it's easy. Oh, a little box. Sorry about that. Followers may doubt what their leaders say, but they usually believe what they do. Number two, it's easier to teach what's right than to do what's right. Writer Mark Twain quipped, "To do what is right is wonderful. To teach what is right is even more wonderful, and much easier." Isn't that the truth? It's always easier to teach what's right than it is to do it. That's one of the reasons why many parents and bosses say, "Do as I say, not as I do." One of my earliest challenges as a leader was to raise my living to the level of my teaching. I can still remember the day that I decided that I would not teach anything I did not try to live out. That was a tough decision, but as a young leader, I was learning to embrace the law of the picture. Author Norman Vincent Peale stated, "Nothing is more confusing than people who give good advice but set a bad example." I would say a related thought is also true. Nothing is more convincing than people who give good advice and set a good example. Recently, I received calls on the same day from two reporters, one from the Chicago Tribune and the other from USA Today, about teaching ethics in the business arena. Both asked similar questions. They wanted to know if ethics could be taught. My answer was yes. But many of the companies that teach ethics classes had ethics problems, one reporter pushed back. That's because ethics can be instilled in others only if it is taught and modeled for them, I replied. Too many leaders are like bad travel agents. They send people places they have never been. Instead, they should be more like tour guides, taking people places they have gone and sharing the wisdom of their own experiences. John Wooden used to say to his players, "Show me what you can do. Don't tell me what you can do." I believe followers have the same attitude toward their leaders. They want to see their leaders in action, doing their best, showing the way, and setting the example.